Hello, my people. I'm coming to you from our classroom today. I needed a whiteboard, so I came into the building in order to record this short presentation for you. I've done some research over the past few weeks and have come up with a diagram that I think might help us put 3 factors that influence zoonotic infections together for us. So what you can do is watch this presentation. You can follow along with me and make your own version of notes as I go through this, or you can stop at any time, take a screenshot, or wait till the end and take a screenshot then in order to include this in your notes. Hopefully this will put things a little bit more together for us. Next week we're going to take a look at some epidemiology, the practice of studying epidemics and how disease passes through a population of people. And this is going to be important in understanding how we are all connected. So the video that you watched earlier this week about all pathogens or all epidemics, zoonotic infections beginning with a mystery, the presenter talked about our connectivity. How are we all connected? We are strongly and closely related to every other living thing, as well as abiotic or non-living factors here on the planet. So this diagram will show that connectivity, or how we are all connected. So let's start up here. First thing that has to happen in order for us to get a zoonotic infection is the biology has to be right. There must be some avenue, some pathway from an organism, a living animal, into us. That means that we're going to share some genetic information with that other organism. We have some DNA or a gene that is in common with that. If it's a virus or a bacteria, that virus or that bacteria also has to have a relationship with us and have some common genetic information in order for us to be vulnerable to infection. So we've got to have biology. Next, we have to have over in this right-hand corner some environmental factors. We are closely related to our environment. That includes climate and weather. Right now, there's Hurricane Sally that is reaching land on our southern coast in Florida, in Louisiana, in those states that are along the Gulf of Mexico. They're expecting between 10 inches and 30 inches of rain to fall on them today. You can imagine that there's going to be flooding. Whenever there's flooding, there's also the risk of having contaminated water supplies for humans. It's really easy for us to have disease spreads when there are conditions such as what we're seeing in the south because of this hurricane today. So rain, wind, something that the folks out west are wishing for today because of 13 forest fires that are currently burning in the state of Oregon. Air quality, air pollution is really an issue out there today. Wind direction and speed is going to influence all kinds of opportunities to actually get a pathogen. So biology and environment are very closely related. I want you to also think about climate change and how temperatures vary on Earth, how trends or patterns in the environment actually change depending upon how human activity actually influences our climate. So climate change is also an issue. We have forest fires burning out west. We have a hurricane hitting our southern shores. And another thing to think about is also the presence of other organisms. I just sketched out a little rabbit here, but we've got all kinds of other organisms that actually share environment with us. So biology is strongly connected to our environment. Our biology, if we are in an environment where there is a zoonotic organism, that organism may have the opportunity to pass that infection into the human population. Some reservoir hosts can pass on an organism that might make us very sick, but then we can't pass that on to others. So, for example, you might get bit by a squirrel, a bat, a raccoon, and rabies, for example, is an infection that can actually be passed from an animal to a human. But rabies cannot be passed from a human to a human. This person would get sick and could actually die because of a rabies infection, but that person cannot transmit the infection to another person. The trouble with our current situation with COVID-19 is that we have now community spread. We get rid of rabies, and this is true of the flu as well. So anything that's airborne is really easy to spread just through community. So we're looking at a situation that's called community spread. That means that if I'm infected, I could pass it on to that person, maybe somebody else. They can pass it on. They keep passing it on. We all pass it on. And that gets to be a big problem. And very easily we can go from a very isolated infection to an epidemic that is just locally spread. Maybe we have an epidemic in Minnesota. We could even have an epidemic at Johnson High School. And that's one of the reasons why we're home. We don't want to actually be participating in this community spread and passing all of our viruses to one another. If epidemics are left to continue to grow and grow and grow, then we'll reach pandemic proportions and the whole world will get involved. Pan, meaning all. Okay, so we want to avoid community spread. The third factor that affects zoonotic infections is over here on this side of the board, and this is human behavior. This one is a little bit of a wild card, and there's a relationship between behavior and your understanding of science. The more we understand the science of infections and infectious pathways, the more we can make our behaviors so that they reduce transmission of a disease. So we have people who don't know the science in our community, and their behaviors actually promote community spread. They actually increase the number of people who are actually being infected. So we've got a relationship here. Now, this is going to include some cultural behaviors as well. But this is going to affect our risk of infection. Now, if I don't think this is true, I won't participate in behaviors that actually reduce my risk. So I might go out in public, get together with all my friends, go to parties. We've got a lot of college students now who are having parties on campus. They're going out to bars, they're hanging out together, and we're seeing a lot of community spread on college campuses, even so that some colleges are closing down and no longer offering classes live on their campus. Some campuses are sending students home. So we've got that kind of behavior going on. We've got cultural relationships with animals, various species in our environment. We practice farming. I come from a family of farmers. You might be into agriculture, but this is usually a problem with livestock. You could keep chickens, you could have cattle, goats, alpacas are even something that people keep on the edge of St. Paul. I've seen some alpaca farms not too far away from the Twin Cities. So that's something as well. Hunting, diet, those kind of practices. We have some cultural customs that we actually will practice involving food, involving diet, involving traditional celebrations or feasts, and that actually can influence our risk as well. Some other behaviors that we've seen over the summer, beginning back at the end of May, the murder of George Floyd. You may have participated in some rallies or some marches or some protests. I did, and I came in contact a little closer to large groups than I was comfortable with. The march that I participated in back in June did involve a number of people. There are probably about, 6,000 people who were present. Most people wore masks, and we also attempted to maintain our social distance of 6 feet and try and respect one another's space. So many of you have figured out that if we wear masks, we can actually reduce the likelihood of transmitting and passing on airborne pathogens that just go through the air, which includes COVID-19. Also, a number of flus, cold viruses are transmitted that way. Remember that we have a number of other pathways. There's foodborne. So we get into our diet there with foodborne. You could ingest, if you are a deer hunter or have deer hunters in your family, there is a disease in our deer population called chronic wasting disease. I'll move here in a second so you can see this. And typically, if you hunt, you should take a tissue sample from your deer into the DNR and have that tested for chronic wasting disease. This can be deadly, and we don't want you to suffer from any infection there. So make sure that you have your deer checked out. And then finally, there is bloodborne. And this would include a number of STIs, sexually transmitted viruses or infections. This also is going to include things like Ebola and Marburg, those very deadly, like 80%, 90% of people infected actually die. So there we have it. In order for us to experience a zoonotic infection, the biology has to be right. We've got to have a way for us to actually have a disease enter the human body, and then it needs to be passed on. We need to have environmental conditions that are right and actually will contribute to the spread of that. And then finally, our behaviors, human behaviors, actually influence whether or not we are likely to contract that virus. So at this time, I'm going to move out of the way, and you can take a screenshot of this. Thank you for watching. Let me know if you have any questions.